see the children of this world urging each other forward, overcoming endless difficulties, and accomplishing immense designs, while, too often, if God's children have any great work which they would fain do for Him, 1,000 difficulties, and 10,000 fears are started, and while they are debating the enemy is gaining ground. Oh, for one such view of our precious Master as Jonathan had. Did we thus see him, all difficulties would vanish. Helen Plumpter. Room for services in the church. In the 14th chapter we see on the part of Jonathan what may be described as a disorderly courage. Disorderly courage has often been crowned with successes, and has therefore presented a strong temptation to ill-controlled natures. Freelancers have unquestionably done good service in many a man, physical and moral. At the same time there ought to be a great central authority in all well-conducted operations. Room should always be left for genius, and for those sudden impulses of the soul which it is sometimes impossible to distinguish from inspiration, but taking rank and file, and looking upon the church as a whole, it will be found that a quiet exercise of discipline and the steady pursuit of paths of order will answer best in the great issue. In the church, let us repeat, room should be found for all sorts of men, for the great king and the young soldier, for the flashing genius and the slow-moving mind. J. Parker, D.
So, anyways, you're in a battle daily. Everything externally can't give you peace, but in the battles that come your way, God gives you peace in the midst of the storm. That's one of His great miraculous miracles that He accomplishes in people's lives.
1 Samuel 14:24-52. And the men of Israel were distressed that day, for Saul had adjured the people. Great issues hang on the king's rash word. One little sentence, spoken in a moment of passion by King Henry II, brought a lifetime of remorse and penance and humiliation, and made him responsible for a murder which his calmer soul abhorred. He had been hearing of repetitions of troubles brought about by his great chancellor, a Becket, and in a moment of exasperated temper exclaimed, "Of the cowards that eat my bread, is there none will rid me of this turbulent priest?" Too soon, and too eagerly, the hasty words were acted upon. The anger of the moment was responsible for a deed which the lifetime of remorse and humiliation could nor undo. Footsteps of truth. Saul's willfulness, that Saul was now suffering in character under the influence of the high position and great power to which he had been raised, is only too apparent from what is recorded in these verses. No doubt he pays more respect than he has been used to pay to the forms of religion. But how are we to explain his increase of religiousness side by side with the advance of moral obliquity and recklessness? Why should he be more careful in the service of God while he becomes more imperious in temper, more stubborn in will, and more regardless of the obligations alike of king and father? The explanation is not difficult to find. The expostulation of Samuel had given him a fright. The announcement that the kingdom would not be continued in his line, and that God had found a worthier man to set over his people Israel, had moved him to the quick. There could be no doubt that Samuel was speaking the truth. Saul had begun to disregard God's will in his public acts, and was now beginning to reap the penalty. He felt that he must pay more attention to God's will. If he was not to lose everything, he must try to be more religious. There is no sign of his feeling penitent in heart. He is not concerned in spirit for his unworthy behavior toward God. He feels only that his own interests as king are imperiled. It is this selfish motive that makes him determined to be more religious. Alas, how common has this spirit been in the history of the world. Louis XIV has led a most wicked and profligate life, and he has ever and anon qualms that threaten him with the wrath of God. To avert that wrath, he must be more attentive to his religious duties. He must show more favor to the church, exalt her dignitaries, to grease her honor, endow her walls and foundations with greater wealth. But that is not all. He must use all the arms and resources of his kingdom for ridding the church of her enemies. For 20 years he must harass the Protestants. What the magnificent monarch did on a large scale, millions of obscure men have done on a small. It is a sad truth that terror and selfishness have been at the foundation of a great deal of that which passes current as religion. But it is all because what he calls religion is no religion. It is the selfish bargain-making spirit, which aims no higher than deliverance from pain. It is not the noble exercise of the soul, prostrated by the sense of guilt, and helpless through consciousness of weakness, lifting up its eyes to the hills whence cometh its help, and rejoicing in the grace that freely pardons all its sin through the blood of Christ, and in the gift of the Holy Spirit that renews and sanctifies the soul. The first thing that Saul does in the exercise of this selfish spirit is to impose on the people an obligation to fast until the day the oldest Jonathan was a true man of God. He was in far nearer fellowship with God than his father, and yet so far from approving of the religious order to fast which his father had given, he regards it with displeasure and distrust. Godly men will sometimes be found less outwardly religious than some other men, and will greatly shock them by being so. God had given a wonderful deliverance that day through Jonathan. Jonathan was as remarkable for the power of faith as Saul for the want of it. At worst, it was but a ceremonial offense, but to Jonathan it was not even that. But Saul was too obstinate to admit the plea. By a new oath, he devoted his son to death. Nothing could show more clearly the deplorable state of his mind. In the eye of reason and of justice, Jonathan had committed no offense. He had given signal evidence of the possession in a remarkable degree of the favor of God. He had laid the nation under inconceivable obligations. All these pleas were for him, and surely in the king's breast a voice might have been heard pleading, "Your son, your firstborn, the beginning of your strength, the excellency of dignity, and the excellency of power." Is it possible that this voice was silenced by jealousy? Jealousy of his own son, like his after-jealousy of David? What kind of heart could this Saul have had when in such circumstances he could deliberately say, "God do so, and more also, for thou shalt surely die, Jonathan"? But the divine right of kings to govern wrong is not altogether without check. A temporary revolution saved Jonathan. It was one good effect of excitement. In calmer circumstances, the people might have been too terrified to interfere. So the people rescued Jonathan, that he died not. Evidently the military spirit ruled in Saul, but it did not bring peace nor blessing to the kingdom. Once off the right trail, Saul never got on it again, rash and restless. He doubtless involved his people in many a disaster, fulfilling all that Samuel had said about taking from the people, fulfilling but little that the people had hoped concerning deliverance from the hand of the Philistines. W. G. Blakey, D. Acting from mere impulse, we have to propose the question, what, in recording this passage, did the Holy Spirit mean that we should learn from it? We shall not be long in perceiving that there is brought before us, chiefly, one more painful defect in Saul's general conduct, and that the consequences associated with that defect are very distinctly described. It is one, too, which is fact from being uncommon. In codes of laws drawn up by man, this defect is not indeed set down by name and signalized as a sin, though humanity bleeds under its effects, but it is condemned, and justly so, by that commandment which is exceeding broad. We refer to the habit of inconsiderateness, the habit of acting from mere impulse, of allowing merely momentary feeling to sway, without pausing to ask whether the act which we perform, or the step on which we decide, will lead us, and how it will affect other persons besides ourselves. It is truly a melancholy instance which this chapter describes. To pronounce a curse at all was presumptuous, where there was no direct command of God to be infringed, and more, what personal pain it inflicted, what actual disadvantages it involved, what further mischief it would have done, if the matter had been left in the king of Israel's hand. How different all would have been, if, instead of following the mere impulse of an excited mind, he had thought for a moment, and, when prompted to issue his decree, had paused to ask, how will this affect my people? How will it operate in the end? But where, in this imperfect world, can we turn our eyes without meeting scenes and circumstances which cause us, involuntarily, to say within ourselves, what a difference there would have been here if there had been more of reflection and less of mere impulse. We may gather a suggestion or two from this part of Saul's history, for our own caution and admonition. 1. Let us remember that this inconsiderateness, this acting from mere impulse, is commonly the result of an overweening regard to self. It was not Saul who commenced this engagement, but he could not bear not to have the most prominent place in the affair, and he must do something to make himself both seen and felt. He must make his authority evident, though the result of his decree would inevitably be the misery of his people all that day. His love for his own dear self, and the manner in which all his thoughts centered around that favorite object, are discernible in the very words of the imprecation, "Cursed be the man that eateth any food until evening, that I may be avenged on mine enemies." Let us make the interests of others the object of our regard in all we undertake. Never let us think of ourselves without, at the same time, thinking of others too. The habit of attaching importance to others' convenience, to others' comforts, to others' feelings, will, under God, prove a great preservative against acting from mere impulse. 2.